What's happening, Internet fam? So today I was on Twitter, which I realized was a mistake. But on Twitter today, almost everybody online was accusing Tulsi of actually being a Russian agent. Like they just took the Hillary Clinton ball and ran with it. And I just couldn't understand how anybody would think so. Now, I want to illustrate why Tulsi is a terrible choice for president. And it has nothing to do with her being a Russian agent, according to Hillary Clinton. Number one, she's on the Council for Foreign Relations. That's the regime change organization that has embroiled the U.S. military in regime change all over the planet. It's definitely a warmongering body that has done horrible detriment to societies all over the world, all over South America, all over the Middle East, all over Asia, Southeast Asia. So anybody related with the Council of Foreign Relations, to me, is, close enough to where they might as well be Henry Kissinger. I am just not a fan of anybody related to the Council of Foreign Relations based on what they've done, which is a horrific genocide all over third world countries all over the planet. So there's that. She also served in the military, which I think serving in the military shows very poor judgment altogether. I think if you serve in the military in this country at this time, that's very similar to serving in the military under Chairman Mao or Joseph Stalin or Adolf Hitler, or take your pick. The point is, we haven't been the good guys in altercation globally in a long, long time. And when you serve in the United States military, you are serving the bad guys, 100%. That's definitely been true the last 50 years. I think maybe it's been true the last 100 years, but, I don't really get to go that far back historically. Personally, I'm just not that interested. So there's some other reasons, though, why I think Tulsi is an absolutely terrible candidate. For one, she wants Medicare for all. Okay, that might be the only one on this list where I'm like, at least in spirit, I kind of agree with her, because it would be better if we had universal health care with single payer. I'm a libertarian, so I don't agree in those kind of things usually, but at this point, the entire country is being held at the barrel of a gun by big pharma, and the cost of healthcare in the United States has skyrocketed beyond what is reasonable for anybody to pretend like they can begin to think about affording. And it's trickled down into problems in everybody's lives everywhere, including people are willing to settle for people that they want to be in a relationship with, because I have health care. It's like, so my wife cheats on me, but I'm going to stay with her because I get health care through her company. It's like there's things like that going on now. That's how bad the healthcare situation is in the United States. So that's the only one on here where I'm kind of like, I might be a little bit more open-minded. She's also into reparations, whatever that means. I never owned any slaves. As far as I know, none of my ancestors going back for hundreds of years owned slaves. Most of my ancestors migrated from Europe within the last 50 or 60 years, certainly after the advent of, or 100 years anyway, but after slavery was abolished. So none of my family owned slaves. So I'm wondering where these reparations are coming from and who's going to pay for them. And at any rate, it's been way too long. I just disagree with reparations altogether because of the length of time. Free college debt forgiveness, that's another thing that Tulsi Gabbard believes in. There's so much wrong with that, I don't know where to unpack. First of all, our education system is a joke. We don't have any kind of education that's anything besides government propaganda. It is garbage from kindergarten right on through college. Most classes are garbage. I went to school for a long time. I went to college, I went to high school, I went to junior high. I did fairly well at all those schools academically, but I found that what I was learning was by and large false. And when it wasn't false, it was framed in a false narrative that made it worse than false, because it clouded your thinking about how to think about a topic. There were a few exceptions to that. There were some practical classes I took. Woodshop I found to be a very practical class. All the athletic programs that I was a part of made me fit and healthy, being on swim team, and the music classes too. I was in orchestra and stuff like that. And I had a couple other classes that were good. I had a philosophy class in college that was cool, and a couple of literature classes. Obviously math is okay. But when you talk about what's being instructed to you regarding psychology and history and anthropology and sociology. I mean, it's all almost completely false in our school system, and that's from the kindergarten level all the way to the college level. So I'm against our current education system 100%, and I'm certainly against making it free. Where's that money coming from? Who are you going to rob to pay for all this ridiculous college? And anyway, it's too expensive anyway. I mean, we should just have like the top level professor in every class give a class on YouTube, and then have some kind of comprehension test, and all of it should be free. But because we've completely eliminated the old style of college and education, which right now, in my opinion, is like miseducation and propaganda and garbage. Certainly shouldn't be free, and debt forgiveness is ridiculous too. If you went into debt, if you agreed to take the debt, you owe the debt. However, I do think that you should be allowed to declare bankruptcy, which is something they've recently taken away from us now. It's very difficult to declare bankruptcy, and when you do, there's all these provisos and quid pro quos where you can't actually declare bankruptcy. Bankruptcy is a useful thing that is absolutely necessary for our society to function, and they've taken it away from us. So anyway, got off topic there. She wants to end the Electoral College, which would basically invalidate anybody who lives in the middle of the country's votes altogether. Ending the Electoral College would ensure that New York and LA pick everything. That's basically it. So if you agree fundamentally with the policies of New York and LA, then yeah, I can see that ending the Electoral College would be a good idea. I think it's funny that she wants to end the Electoral College, and she's from Hawaii. So she's basically invalidating all of her constituents with that policy change. Hawaii would have almost no vote if we got rid of the Electoral College. It would, like I said, it would be pretty much New York and LA would pick everything. So completely disagree with her on that. $15 minimum wage, that's another one where it's like this real emotional issue where people feel really good about, oh, wouldn't it be great if everybody was making at least $15 an hour? Okay, first of all, that's not really enough. $15 an hour is still like under the poverty line. You certainly can't raise a family, certainly can't do a lot of other things you'd like to do with your life on $15 an hour. That's just right off the top. Secondly, minimum wage laws at all were invented in a horrendous racial way. The Corbett Report does a great documentary about the roots of the minimum wage. The minimum wage was specifically designed to keep African Americans impoverished. That's why the minimum wage was designed. And guess what? It's still doing that. I understand it doesn't, you don't think it does, you don't feel like it does. It feels like, oh, there should be a minimum wage. But what you're actually doing is you're disenfranchising the lowest earners in our society. You really are. And you're making it very difficult for a lot of people to even get jobs at all. Because if the minimum wage is $15, a lot of companies will just, we just won't hire somebody. We'll put an automated checker there. We'll make somebody else work double hours. We'll cut down on our quality. They're not going to pay $15 an hour because they can't afford it. They certainly can't afford it with the ballooning healthcare costs, etc. So the minimum wage, any kind of minimum wage, is a really, really bad idea. You just have to look at the math. I understand you feel that people should make a certain amount of money. I agree with you. I think everybody should make $100 an hour. Honestly, that would be, if everybody was making $100 an hour and we didn't have this billionaire class, incentivizing our government to continue bombing the third world with robots, etc., that would be great. But that's not where we're at, and we're not going to get there anytime soon. Certainly not with the methodology of a minimum wage, which absolutely does wreaks havoc on the lower class in particular. So I completely agree. She wants to end fracking, so she says, but she's on the Council for Foreign Relations, which means she's all about, bombing all these countries and getting more oil. So I'm not really sure. It's almost like she's just saying that and she doesn't really mean it. So, which is my guess on Tulsi, by the way, across the board. I think she talks a good game, and I think she's full of shit. That's my opinion. Also, she wants to end the Second Amendment, which makes her completely unelectable for me and also millions of other Americans, because especially if you do the research on gun laws, common sense gun laws, when you implement gun laws, you disenfranchise innocent people. You make it impossible for them to defend themselves and their families. And you do almost nothing to mitigate crime. In fact, it brings crime numbers up almost universally. It did in Australia, it did in Ireland, did in England. Do the research yourself. I compel you to. Also, just look at the way it is in this country. Chicago has the strictest gun laws of anywhere in the country. Chicago is a bloodbath. There's, 40, 50 people being shot every weekend. So what are those gun laws doing? Are they helping? Apparently not. In fact, gun laws do the exact opposite of what the intent is. Gun laws make sure that more people get shot. That's just the way it works. I know it's counterintuitive, but that's literally the way it works. If you look at the numbers, that's irrefutable. So really encourage everybody to really think about that and look at that and do the research, because the Second Amendment is the only thing at this point keeping America from being, Mao's socialist China and, all of us living in work camps. I mean, we're that close. We're there. Tulsi's in favor of Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood is another organization that was started absolutely by racists in order to promote a genocide against African Americans specifically. It's hard for me to even begin to think about Planned Parenthood in any kind of positive way, especially when the message that we're giving is, oh, it's okay to sleep around all the time. It's okay to cheat on your husband, cheat on your wife. It's okay to sleep with somebody else's husband or somebody else's wife. It's okay to cause all that detriment to society, to families, to children in particular, especially children. It's okay to do all that. Even though it's super unhealthy for you, for yourself mentally, to be hoeing around like that. It's super unhealthy for your mind and for your body. But let's not talk about that. Let's just give everybody abortions whenever they want. And abortions are also hugely physically and psychologically damaging. If you don't think that abortion is hugely psychologically damaging, you just don't know. You're lying to yourself, because they are incredibly damaging. So, not that I think that abortions should be illegal. Again, as a libertarian, I think that almost everything should be legal. However, we should be educating people properly about the dangers and the negative impacts that those kind of lifestyle choices are making on especially children, but also adults and teenagers and everybody else in between. So, she's also in favor of the universal basic income, which I think is a really ludicrous bad idea. Where's that money going to come from? We need to have less taxes. We need less government in our lives. We need less government agencies. We need to eliminate all of these unconstitutional agencies, the Federal Reserve, the IRS, the CIA, the NSA, the DOJ. I mean, all of these alphabet, the FBI, the EPA, the CDC, the FDA, all of these agencies are illegal and unconstitutional, and all they really do is prop up, corrupt, and hugely life-destroying corporations. The FDA is now run completely by former industry executives out of the healthcare industry, aka the opioid crisis industry. And that's just the way it goes. I mean, if you look at it throughout all of history, anytime a giant empire tries to start doing these kind of programs, the empire inevitably collapses because of corruption. And we see it happening here, just like it happened in ancient Rome or in Great Britain when they were the big dogs. It's another one of those things where you're thinking, oh man, wouldn't that be great if everybody just made $1,000 a week and we could all survive and it'd be great. Yeah, wouldn't that be great, Wally? But you know what? It's not realistic. It's not realistic at all, especially not when Amazon and Starbucks own everything. Where's that money going to come from? And also, Tulsi Gabbard supported Bernie in 2016, who literally, his platform was literally verbatim Joseph Stalin's platform. People don't understand that, and people say, okay, well, yeah, Bernie Sanders is not Joseph Stalin. I agree. He's not Joseph Stalin. And I am not advocating for Joseph Stalin or Bernie Sanders by admitting that they are different people. However, the simple fact is those policies that Bernie Sanders wanted to implement will lead to a dystopian fascism. That's just, it's inevitable. And certainly having a policy list that is verbatim of Joseph Stalin should be worrying for people, and people don't know. People are uneducated about that. They think, oh, this Bernie's this nice old guy, we just love Bernie. I mean, it's a cult of personality thing, which also, by the way, is how Stalin rose to power, with the cult of personality popularity contest. And the reality is that his policies were disastrous for the country that he ended up taking over. this is something like genocide against 6 million Ukrainians, for example, among many others. The total genocide on the Mongols that wasn't even counted. Untold millions died there. So, not a fan of Joseph Stalin. Therefore, I'm not a fan of Bernie Sanders. Therefore, I'm not a fan of people who are a fan of Bernie Sanders. And that includes Tulsi Gabbard in 2016, who's on the Council for Foreign Relations, sitting elbow to elbow with Henry Kissinger, deciding to pursue regime change in other countries. You know, she says she's hawkish on terrorism. Terrorism's not a thing you can be hawkish on. Terrorism is a concept. It's not something you can declare war on. It's certainly not something you could win war on. You can't have a war on terrorism. You can't have a war on obesity. You can't have a war on bad ideas. I'd like to have a war on bad ideas. Then all of those wars would be over right away. But that's not how the world works. You actually have to have something you're going to war against. And I would like to go to war against the giant corporations. But I don't hear anybody on either ticket talking about that. So, therefore, I will not be voting for either a Democrat or Republican anytime soon.